Those of you who are not familiar with Spotlight PA, we are an independent, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated to investigative and public service journalism about the Pennsylvania state government and urgent statewide issues. Our mission is to hold powerful public and private forces to account through urgent and compelling reporting that empowers voters and drives positive change for the state we all call home. All of our journalism is available to the public at no cost, and that's made possible thanks to the support of people like you. Today, more than 3,000 folks all across our state support our work financially and make events like this debate possible. I want to thank all of our members across the state for their deep commitment to local news in Pennsylvania. And if you don't yet support our journalism, you can learn more about Spotlight PA by visiting spotlightpa.org. Again, that's spotlightpa.org. I want to again thank our host for tonight's event, Dickinson College, and all of our host partners. And with that, I'll hand it back to our moderator, Scott Lamar, to get things going.
Thanks, Chris. Now let's meet the Republican candidates for the U.S. Senate that are participating in the Pennsylvania in the Spotlight debate tonight. You may applaud after each of the candidates is introduced, but I will have a little rule about applause after this. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Kathy Barnett. Jeff Bartos. George Paquetto. Sean Gale. And Carla Sands. All right, so let me go over the rules first before I introduce our panelists that will be asking tonight's question. Now, here's that part about applause. Please hold your applause or cheering or reacting during the debate. At the end, you can let off your steam and cheer on anyone you want, but we're very much up against the clock and trying to get to as many issues as we can, so we want to get through this as quickly as we can with as many issues as we can, so no applause during the debate itself. Candidates are allotted a 60-second opening statement and a 30-second closing statement. Most of the debate is divided into a series of topics, each beginning with a question posed to a specific candidate, followed by each of the other candidates answering the same question. Both the moderator and the questioners are permitted to ask follow-up questions. Candidates must wait to be asked a question by the moderator or a questioner or to be called on during open discussion before speaking. We will alternate which candidate answers in what order. Candidates cannot interrupt or speak over other candidates or the moderator or questioners. Candidates who are directly criticized during open discussion are allotted 30 seconds to respond, but only after the moderator calls on them. So let me introduce our panel tonight, our journalist who will be asking the questions of the candidate, going my right to left, well, no, left to right, yeah. So I'm trying to do this for a television audience. It's not a good sign for television. Anyway, joining us tonight to ask the questions, Evie DeJesus of Penn Live, Jonathan Tamari of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Paula Reed Ward of Trib Live. I want to thank all three of our journalists for being here tonight and asking the questions as well. So we're going to start with opening statements, and candidates, you have 60 seconds. I should point out, and the audience will notice this as well, that we have a timer here that will hold up a yellow sign when you have about 10 seconds to go and a red sign when it is time to stop, okay? All right, so let's start with opening statements, and Kathy Barnett, we'll start with you. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you so much. Hello, Pennsylvania. Let me tell you, and to the country as well, I love this state, I love our country, and I am completely unapologetic about it. I believe America is the greatest nation that has ever existed, but I believe she's the greatest nation that has ever existed because she was founded upon the greatest political document ever written. But right now, our country is in danger because we have elected officials who are moving through our Constitution like a whale moves through a net. And newsflash to a lot of people, our country does not exist apart from the U.S. Constitution. This seat that we are running for is so crucial. who would have ever thought that the greatest nation would come down to just one seat? But that's where we find ourselves right now. One seat separates Democrats from being able to do exactly what they have always said they wanted to do, and that is to fundamentally change this nation. That is why I'm running. These are very serious times. I look forward to explaining to you why I am the better candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say your name again.
He's ready.
He is ready to go. Jeff Bartos, 60 seconds.
So before I start my remarks, I just want to wave to all of our friends at home, of course, starting with Mehmet Oz and Dave McCormick. Sorry you couldn't be here tonight. I'm sure you're in a much warmer location. So, hey, guys. My name's Jeff Bartos, born and raised in Reading, Pennsylvania, married to Cheryl for 25 years. Cheryl was raised in Lehigh County in Allentown. Our daughters, Emily and Sarah, are 21 and 19. They're also raised in the southeastern part of the state, and we are all lifelong Pennsylvanians. I'm running for the United States Senate to save Main Street, Pennsylvania. Early in the pandemic, when all of us started to suffer under the lockdowns and the shutdowns and all of the fear and all of the tearing apart of the communities that we hold dear, I started a nonprofit to help save small businesses. We raised $3.5 million and helped over 1,000 women and men keep the lights on, saving thousands of jobs for working families. You can't save Main Street if you can't find Main Street. And we have political tourists who have parachuted into this state to run for the seat. You can trust me to fight for you and your families.
Stop.
I always have. I always will.
Stop. Thank you. George Paquetto, 60 seconds.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and I'm so proud to be here. I started out in this world under somewhat harsh conditions when I was left on the doorstep of an orphanage where I grew up for the first 6 years of my life. And when you grow up in an orphanage, you have to learn some lessons early, and you learn how to recognize reality. And the reality is today that we face very, very systemic, difficult, existential threats in our country. And we need to have people go to Washington to represent us who understand these threats, understand these difficulties, and have a sense of how to address them and solve them. I've had the training as a lawyer practicing in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania for 45 years of problem solving. Problem solving is the most important obstacle we face today.
Time.
And I'm going to address some problems tonight, and I'm going to also address how I think we should solve them.
We'll have to get to that in just a moment. Want to introduce Sean Gale now. Mr. Gale, you have 60 seconds.
Well, I'm Sean Gale, and I'm running for United States Senate. And while the other candidates get up and they brag about themselves, they promise the world it never happens, I talk about why it doesn't happen. And it's because we have weak, pathetic Republicans in Washington that do not champion conservative values. One of them being our U.S. Senator, Pat Toomey, who's been a complete disgrace. And the issue that put me in this race, the straw that broke the camel's back, was Pat Toomey's ultimate betrayal, and that's when he voted to convict Donald Trump at that bogus hearing back in February 2021. And it's interesting because the Pennsylvania Republican Party had a vote on whether or not to censure Pat Toomey for his vote to convict Donald Trump, and they voted not to censure him. So they told us what we're going to get. Pat Toomey 2.0, just like Pat Toomey was Arlen Specter 2.0. And I hope if nothing else is clear from my talk here today, I am not another Pat Toomey. We cannot afford another backstabbing rhino in Washington. We have plenty of them.
Thank you. And Carla Sands, 60 seconds.
Thank you. I'm Carla Sands, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. I'm a pro-life, pro-First Amendment, pro-Second Amendment, constitutional conservative, America first, businesswoman, Christian, and mom. I'm also an eighth-generation Pennsylvanian, and my Pennsylvania ancestors fought in the American Revolution and in the Civil War. And this is our time to fight for the heart and soul of our great country. I was President Trump's ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. I worked to counter Russia and China with the DoD and with NATO. I also worked to increase our trade with Denmark over 43%. I'd be honored to earn your support. I will always be a reliable, conservative vote in the Senate, and I will never bow to the swamp.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to get into the questions, and Jeff Bartos, you're going to get the first question from Paula.
Hi, Mr. Bartos. Even as the pandemic economic recovery continues, rising inflation is taking a bigger bite out of Americans' paychecks. What specific policies would you support in the Senate to combat inflation?
Well, inflation is another word for a tax, and it's a tax on working families. Now, as I spent the pandemic raising money and helping to save small businesses across all 67 counties, those small business owners and the working families that work in those businesses across all 67 counties were suffering. They survived the pandemic, many of them. The gut punch, the Biden administration's policies that is delivering a gut punch to those families is an insult. It's disrespectful. It's unbelievably hard on families. As we sit here tonight, or as we stand here tonight, there are families that are making decisions about whether to fill up their tank, put food on the table, or whether they can go on a vacation, whether they can even continue to go to work, whether they can afford to go to work. Inflation is wrecking our economy, and we have to remember that these were policies put in place by the Biden administration. The inflation we are suffering from right now is a direct result of flooding the field with money, paying people to stay home, and shutting us all down, taking very delicate supply lines and ripping them apart.
Time.
Get government out of the way. That's how we start to solve this problem.
Mr. Barchetto, same question about what you would do in the Senate to try to bring inflation under control.
Inflation is clearly one of the most important problems that we now face. But I think the solutions and the approaches to inflation are very straightforward. We have to stop printing money. We have to stop giving away money to the tune of trillions of dollars, which put more money into the system, which lessens the value of our dollars. And we have to reach energy independence. When we are energy independent, we control the price. When we are not energy independent, as we are now, when we're reliant on OPEC, when we're reliant on foreign nations, they set the price. And when they set the price higher, we're stuck paying it. So the approach to inflation is very, very straightforward and crystal clear. And it's something that I think we need to talk more about in tonight's debate.
All right, thank you. Sean Gale, same question for you.
Yeah, so in inflation, we have to stop the radical spending that we're using. It's out of control, and also the printing of money. And that's what's driving down the dollar's value. But where you hear inflation talked about the most is at the gas pump. And I remind people that when you're paying at the gas pump, it's not just inflation that's causing that cost. It's 58 cents per gallon tax at the pump. And that was brought to us by a Republican governor, House, and Senate. Total Republican control under Tom Corbett. And they had an opportunity to do a lot of things, and all they gave us was the highest gas tax in the nation. So I often hear that they conflate the two things, the gas prices and inflation. Inflation's only half the problem. We're paying a lot of extra that we shouldn't have to pay as well.
Carla Sands?
We have to get the inflation under control. It's hurting our working families and our seniors on a fixed income. It's costing our Pennsylvania families more than $5,000 this year because of the out-of-control, radical Biden administration spending. These multi-trillion-dollar big bad bills stuffed with Green New Deal policies are at the heart of it. The multi-trillion dollars has caused the cost of everything to go up. And then the kerosene on the fire of inflation is Biden's war on American and Pennsylvania energy. I will work to increase our energy exploration, harvesting, put the pipes in, and that's going to help the cost of energy and the cost of everything to go down. Fertilizer has skyrocketed in price, largely because of his war on our energy. I'll be your energy senator. I'll bring the price at the pump down. When you're pumping your gas, I want you to think of Carla Sands for the Senate. I'm going to bring that price down. I'm going to look after our families and our seniors and stop the out-of-control spending in Washington on day one.
Ms. Sands, let me just follow up a little bit. When you say the war on energy, the Biden's war on energy, what specifically do you mean?
Well, specifically, on day one, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, part of America's energy platform, if you will. Several months into his administration, he said he wasn't going to sanction that Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the gas pipeline going from Russia to Germany. My team and I blocked that pipeline. The only place it was never completed was in Danish waters. And then I had the threat of sanctions. We blocked that gas pipeline. It's part of Putin's war on Europe and part of his war using energy as a weapon.
Time. Kathy Barnett, question, how in the Senate, what would you do to try to bring inflation down?
Well, for the audience, imagine inflation being, for example, if I had to use an example of me getting water and spilling it on the floor. In order for me to get the water up, I will need something to absorb that inflation, right, or that water. Likewise with inflation. The inflation, Milton Friedman said, inflation is everywhere, is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So it is as a direct result of the Federal Reserve printing too much money, paying people to sit home and all of that. But how do you absorb that inflation? You absorb it by having goods and services and products. And so Democrats, let's talk about some of the things that they've done that has perpetuated inflation. With the energy crisis, for example, that is a commodity that has the ability to absorb that inflation. But instead of allowing it and allowing America to be energy independent, they cut off our nose despite our face, and now we don't have a very real commodity that is in demand to be able to absorb that. It is a war on energy, and I would be in office to make sure that that war on energy ceases.
Let me follow up on that just a little bit. Most economists, and even some Democratic economists, will agree that the money that was allocated by Congress probably did add to inflation, but they said there were other factors as well, meaning that a lot of people went out and bought things that weren't there because of the pandemic, the supply chain issues that we had. So do you blame it squarely on the Biden administration, or do you accept that there were other factors involved?
Yeah, listen, Democrats could change all of this tomorrow. But in order to do so, they would have to admit that everything they have done and said has been a complete and utter failure. So when we talk about the supply chain, for example, 20% of our shipping containers in the world is still floating outside of our ports. Instead of Pete Buttigieg not being on maternity leave and figuring out how to get those goods and services off the boats and into stores on the shelves, because again, those goods would have absorbed that inflation. But instead, he took maternity leave instead of doing what was needed to get those goods off the boats and into our stores.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to our next question now. Evie DeJesus has a question for George Paquetto to start.
Mr. Paquetto, many Republicans in Congress attempted to throw out Pennsylvania's 2020 electoral votes, effectively disregarding the voices of almost 7 million voters. How would you have voted on the question of certifying Pennsylvania's electoral college votes in the 2020 election?
Well, let me give you some facts so that we all are working from the same baseline. In the 2020 vote in Pennsylvania, Joe Biden received at the polling places approximately 1,500,000 votes. Donald Trump received at the polling places about 2,800,000 votes. He was actually up 1,300,000 votes. So why didn't Donald Trump win? Act 77, that unconstitutional statute which allows mail-in voting. Here's the mail-in voting numbers. Joe Biden got 1,995,000 mail-in votes. Donald Trump got 595,000. Donald Trump wound up losing that election directly because of Act 77, no excuse mail-in voting, which was harvested by the Democrats, where we don't know who signed them, when they signed them, how they signed them, why they signed them.
Something you just said.
Vote harvesting is absolutely at the root
Something
of
you just
why
said. You said Donald Trump lost that election?
Pardon me?
You said Donald Trump lost that election?
Donald Trump received less votes in that election than Joe Biden. However, what you have to understand is that the reason Joe Biden got so many votes is because they were able to exploit Act 77, which is an unconstitutional statute. It's been held as unconstitutional by the Commonwealth Court. And if it were not for those mail-in votes, that Joe Biden got 80% of the mail-in votes, 80%. No politician gets an 80% vote margin. They harvested those votes. They falsified those votes. They skewed the election.
Mr. Pichetto.
You asked the question, I'm going to answer it.
We have rules that we follow.
And my rule is that I'm going to complete an answer so that the public
you agreed to the rules ahead of time.
and the audience
to the rules
knows
ahead of time.
exactly what's at stake
Okay,
here.
well,
Mr. Pichetto, if elected, do you pledge to certify Pennsylvania's 2024 electoral votes as affirmed by the Pennsylvania Department of State?
What we need to do, the case of Act 77 is now pending in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, awaiting decision. If the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturns the Commonwealth Court ruling that held that that statute was unconstitutional, that will be an affront to every citizen and every voter in Pennsylvania. And I will be the first one to help take that case to the United States Supreme Court. I've had election law cases my entire career. I've been involved in and out of election law courts all over Pennsylvania. That is the most important thing we can do in this election.
Mr. Gale?
I would have not voted to certify the election of 2020 because Act 77 gave us 50 days of no excuse mail-in voting. It is unconstitutional. The Pennsylvania Constitution lays out parameters for absentee ballot voting, which requires a valid excuse. By creating 50 days of no excuse mail-in voting, they clearly violated that Constitution. And the blood is on the hands of every single Republican state senator in Harrisburg who voted for it. And it is unacceptable that there are two candidates running for governor in this election that voted for that unconstitutional mail-in voting legislation, Act 77. One of those candidates is Doug Mail-in Mastriano. And I will tell you this, if Doug Mastriano wins that governor's race and is leading this ticket in the fall, we are going to lose not only the governor's seat, but the Senate seat as well. Because the biggest issue in this election is election integrity. And the voters are disenfranchised. And it is a direct result of Act 77. Act 77 is the reason why we have Joe Biden in the White House.
Carlos Sands, same question for you about in the Senate, whether you would have vote to certify Pennsylvania's.
In what year?
2020.
So in 2020, I was working in Copenhagen as the U.S. ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. And I voted absentee here in Pennsylvania because, first of all, we were in a pandemic and I was serving as the ambassador and there weren't many days I was allowed out of the country. There are rules. But as a matter of fact, we know that the election of 2020 was stolen. Senator Rand Paul said, was the election of 2020 stolen? Yes, it was stolen legally by the Zuckerberg money, the Zuck bucks, that controlled how the election was held, almost $500 million into a nonprofit that controlled how the election was held, where the ballots were harvested, where they were counted. And Rand Paul said they did a forensic analysis, and if not for that money, Donald Trump would be president today. I also refer you to Dinesh D'Souza's new movie. It's about the mules that harvested ballots and put them in drop boxes throughout our country to also affect the outcome of the election. 2020 happened. It was real.
Time. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that being real. This has come up in courts across the country, and there have been 60 rulings that said no fraud in the election.
Fraud is not the issue,
with
all due respect.
Mr. Paquette, okay, what is the issue then?
The issue is whether state legislatures have passed statutes allowing for mail-in balloting that directly violate the Pennsylvania Constitution and other constitutions of other states.
It is Carlos Sands. It is Carlos Sands' turn.
Here's my answer about 2020, 2024, 2022. If France, a large country in Europe, can have an election day in person with paper ballots affirming that they are a citizen, and they can count those votes in one day, and they can tell the citizens of France the outcome of that election, how the heck can we not do it in the greatest democracy in the country, in the world?
Hold on.
Carla, I want to follow up on one item. You mentioned mailing in your vote when you were abroad in Denmark. You claimed during that time that your vote was not counted. It was counted. There are public records that show that. Do you regret making that claim?
As a matter of fact, Jonathan, no, I don't regret that. Let me tell you the story. I was working in Denmark. I mailed in my ballot. I checked online, did my vote count, and it said online there was no record of my vote. I called my assistant. I said, could you please check, did my vote count? She called a wonderful lady. She was very helpful. She said, yes, as a matter of fact, that vote did count. I went back online, and guess what? Online, it said, your vote is not known and did not count. To this day, I do not have satisfaction.
Time. Kathy Barnett, question for you, same question for you, whether as a senator you would have certified Pennsylvania's electoral votes.
You know, what's interesting about this question is that I watched the debate from last night, and I don't recall anyone asking the Democrat senatorial candidates that question.
But they don't question it.
I don't recall anyone asking that question. Democrats made an entire industry out of the 2016 on election and on challenging elections. They made an entire industry on it. And I don't remember anyone, specifically in the media, ever challenging any Democrats who ran around talking about hashtag Trump is not my president. And yet, as Republican candidates, every time we walk into a room where the moderators happen to lean more left because it's kind of obvious, that they begin to ask us that question, what would you have done? What do you think? And yet, I'm watching the debate last night and no one asked any of them. And yet in 2016, we saw what they did. There was fraud in 2020 election. There was, Rand Paul called it legal fraud. There were irregularities. How do I know that? Because I was a candidate in 2020. I know what I experienced. It was real and it was wrong. There's nothing more important than making sure that my one vote counts.
Jeff, we'll come to you one more. Ms. Barnett, I just want to follow up on that. You mentioned your election in 2020. You lost that election by roughly 20 percentage points in a congressional race. There's never been documented a case of election fraud anywhere near that level. There was an investigation by Bill Barr, President Trump's Attorney General, found no fraud that could affect the presidential election. Do you concede that you lost your 2020 election fair and square?
I never said that I won that election. What I said was that it was wrong. The Constitution, in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4 is very clear on who has the right to make laws pertaining to our elections, and it is the General Assembly. And yet we saw on election night, I won 76% of the vote, and yet over the next 3 days, I saw with the mail-in ballots, I saw all of that get evaporated, not winning even one. That's statistically impossible. But my challenge has always been, as an American citizen who is willing to fight for our rights in the military, my vote should count, and I should have great security in that.
Jeff Bardo, same question to you. Would you vote as a senator to not certify Pennsylvania's votes?
By the way, when I get done here and go check my phone, my dad will have sent 4 text messages saying, are you ever going to talk in this debate? Are they going to give you a chance to talk? So thank you for the question. I promise I will answer the question, but I'm going to return to inflation for a second, only to say as follows, because the question was asked, is there anything, do we blame Joe Biden, do we blame the government? Today, or tomorrow at this point, because the president is definitely asleep already, tomorrow the president could sign with the stroke of a pen executive orders that open up federal lands more extensively for drilling. He could sign with the stroke of a pen allowing LNG to be transported on tanker trucks, or I'm sorry, on trains until we allow pipelines in. We can start to waive all sorts of regulations around permits to let permits go and be released so we can get pipelines in the ground. We could have a meaningful impact on inflation at the pump through federal government action immediately if Joe Biden actually took the pen out and signed those executive orders. He's not going to, but he should.
Okay.
On the voting, yes, I would vote to certify. If I was in the Senate, I would vote to certify the 2020 election.
All right. Let's move on to the next question. It's Jonathan.
No follow-up?
Well, you answered the question.
That's right. Jonathan Tamari with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and this question goes to Mr. Gale.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gale. If Russia's attacks were to go beyond Ukraine and to attack a NATO ally, would you support sending American troops to defend a NATO ally?
I think we have to be very careful. I think that's very dangerous to engage with foreign nations, especially when Ukraine is not in NATO. But let's be honest about why we have the issues we have in Ukraine. It's because we have a very weak president. And when the way he left Afghanistan is what caused all this. It sent a signal to the world that America is weak. And when America is weak, the world suffers. And that starts with domestic policy. The best foreign policy is a strong domestic policy. And we hear a lot of talk about energy in Ukraine. We have energy right under our feet here in Pennsylvania. We should be tapping into that, not only to supply our own nation, but to supply foreign nations as well. We have plenty to do that. And also, Ukraine's the breadbasket of Europe. They're a big food supplier for Europe. We have a number one industry here in Pennsylvania. It's still agriculture. So we could step up in that regard, too. So that's what we need to do to fight this war globally, is do what we need to do domestically.
Carlos Sands, same question to you about the position on sending American troops to defend a NATO ally.
Well, we have Article 5, and it's an ironclad agreement that we will defend our NATO allies. But the fact is, I believe in peace through strength. We have a weak, corrupt, and compromised president in the White House. It has made the pathway open for Russia to invade Ukraine. They would never have done this under a strong U.S. president. They wouldn't have dared do this under President Trump. But as a matter of fact, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, him not sanctioning Nord Stream 2, him telling Russia, well, if it's a minor incursion, we're not going to do anything about it, open that door. We are in a dangerous, unprecedented time, and we need a senator who's ready on day one to fight and defend our country. There's no one else in this race on either side of the aisle ready on day one to defend our country against Russia and China, our foreign adversaries, that understands how to do that. I was awarded the Department of Defense's highest civilian honor for my work. I'm ready on day one. I will fight for America in the Senate and make sure that we are secure.
Time. Kathy Barnett, same question to you.
Yes, in regards to Ukraine, the question, right? Listen, it's not just one thing and then done, right? We need the senators on our side of the aisle. We need to be more deliberate. We need to be more sober and more disciplined. Right now, our foreign affairs policy looks like a wild game of whack-a-mole. Whatever pops up, we're just patting it out, right? We need to become more disciplined. And right now, what are we showing our enemies is that America is not to be feared. And what we're showing our allies, if we did have to go to war, we could not solely go on our own. And right now, our allies are beginning to pivot and beginning to look to new people to create relationships with. So when we're looking at our allies, we're teaching them right now by how we exited out of Afghanistan, what is taking place in Ukraine, that America is a treacherous friend to have. If we want to begin to show strength, it's not just send weapons, send boots on the ground, but let's begin to give Taiwan what they need. Let's begin to show the world that we have adults in the room and we're going to take seriously not only our defense, but our allies' defense as well.
All right, let's go on now to Mr. Bardos and a question about whether NATO, we honor that agreement, send American troops in.
Perhaps the most solemn duty of a United States Senator would be to vote to send the forces, to send the sons and daughters of Main Street, Pennsylvania to fight in a foreign land. There is no more somber responsibility of a United States Senator than to vote for that. We are duty-bound by Article 5, by our NATO treaty. We're duty-bound, and I would vote to support sending troops to defend any of our NATO allies. The word of the United States is critical. We are the leader of the free world. We are the indispensable ally. And so that is a very difficult vote. But if you can't take difficult votes, you shouldn't be running for office. I want to stress, though, on the eve of this invasion, I was the only candidate to put out a comprehensive plan on the steps that the Biden administration should be taking. I asked some of the advisors of the other candidates why people were silent, some of the people who aren't here tonight. And I was told by people who know them, they didn't want to take the chance. It was too risky to put out specific policies. If you can't lead, don't bother showing up. Well, I'm always going to lead, and I'm always going to be honest with you on these difficult issues.
Mr. Pichetto, what about NATO and Ukraine?
Yes, of course I would vote in favor of sending troops over to defend our NATO allies. We've agreed to do so. We're bound to do so. To not do so is to shrink and surrender and avoid our responsibilities, and I'm not for that. But I want to get back, Mr. Tumari, to this voter fraud issue. Fraud is not the issue. Here's the issue. Joe Biden received 1,995,000 mail-in votes in 2020 in Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth Court said those mail-in votes were unconstitutional. There's no disputing those two sets of facts. And if that's the case, and you look at the fact that Mr. Biden won this so-called election by 80,000 overall votes, how in the world can you then say that Joe Biden constitutionally won the vote? The Commonwealth Court has already stated that it hasn't.
Let me ask you a follow-up question on that. Are you suggesting that, okay, yes, Commonwealth Court did make that ruling that Act 77 as written was unconstitutional. Right. Are you suggesting it should be retroactive?
I'm not suggesting it should be retroactive, but that was not the question. The question is not whether I would undo what's been done, but what the question should be and is what are we going to do in the future? Are we going to continue to allow this unconstitutional statute to go into effect? The Pennsylvania Supreme Court right now has undone the Commonwealth Court's ruling of unconstitutionality and said Act 77 shall remain in place. Most of you have already received in the mail your solicitations for mail-in votes.
Thank you.
Right now, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania is allowing
Mr. Buchanan,
an unconstitutional process to go forward.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. And Paula Reed, I'm using your middle name now, too. But Paula is going to ask this question of Carla Sands.
Good evening. What is your position on expanded background checks for gun purchases to include sales such as those at gun shows?
Well, that's an important question. I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I say give no quarter. The left keeps taking an inch here and an inch there. It's time for conservatives, for Republicans, to take our country back and tell the left they can compromise for the next 3 or 4 decades. Because we're taking our country back. I also just wanted to share, one of my opponents on this debate floor, she's attacked most of us in this debate. And I just want to share, set the record straight. She lost her election in 2020 by 20 points to a weak Democrat, Madeline Dean. And it was in a red wave year, the best year for Republicans since 1953. And as a matter of fact, John Fetterman is a strong Democrat. I will beat John Fetterman in the fall, and we will hold this seat in Republican hands, and I will go and put forward America First policy in Washington, representing every one of you viewers.
Time. Since she's directing this to you, Kathy Barnett, 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I think that election integrity is very important. I don't think that there's any other question that is more important in our country today than making sure that my one vote counts. As your senator, I will make sure that that is the case. In regards to electability, my very presence when I walk into the room, I neutralize more than half of Democrats' talking points. That is power in the hands of the Republican Party if we understand the power. Because what exactly are Democrats going to run on? Inflation? I don't think so. We know what they're going to run on.
I'd like to follow up, Ms. Sands, if I could, relative to your answer about being a Second Amendment absolutist.
Sure, I'm a constitutional conservative.
Do you support any type of federal ban, whether on assault weapons or high-capacity magazines, drum magazines? Do you support any kind of restriction on any of those things?
I'm a proud gun owner. I don't own guns for hunting, although I do like to hunt. One of our opponents, Mehmet Oz, has publicly called, and we have the video, my team is going to push it out tonight on social media. He has publicly called for the CDC to regulate guns. Absolutely, he does not share our values and our conservative principles. He has flip-flopped on every issue. He served in the Turkish military, even though he was born in Ohio. He served in the Turkish military decades ago, and he's a Turkish citizen.
All right. Kathy Barnett, same question about guns.
What is the question again?
The question is whether or not you would support expanded background checks for sales of guns at gun shows, and then following up relative to a potential ban of either assault weapons or high-capacity magazines.
Yeah. Allow me to ask you, the audience, the people who are watching at home, a question. What is a prerequisite to be a criminal? Pause for a moment. That you don't obey the law. So when we continue to come up with law after law after law, who are we really writing those laws for, except for law-abiding citizens? Right now, we have over 300,000 laws on the book regulating the Second Amendment. So are we trying to say that 301 more law is going to do the trick? I don't think so. I am a constitutional Republican. I believe that the Second Amendment guarantees my individual and fundamental right to keep and bear arms as a law-abiding citizen, and I do not believe that that should be infringed upon. If the left is so unnerved by gun violence, then stop allowing our legal system to become a revolving door for criminals. We need to lock them up, and that is a surefire way of getting guns off the street.
Jeff Marta, same question to you.
Well, I grew up in Berks County, and I grew up in a house where my dad made his own shotgun shells. He made his own .45 caliber bullets. He reloaded. And my 21st birthday present was a Glock 21. As a young age, I learned how to take apart, clean, put back together, properly use and properly store a firearm. My dad raised me right. That's just the Berks County way. You never have to worry about me compromising on any of our Second Amendment rights. I will never let you down because I would never let my own father down. Now, Kathy brings up a really good point. Only in a twisted mind, and I'm from Philadelphia now. We live in the Philadelphia suburbs. I love Philadelphia, unapologetically. Sorry for all you Steelers and Penguins fans out there. I love Philadelphia. It breaks my heart every day to see what's happening in the great city of Philadelphia. Our men and women in blue are feeling that they can't do their jobs. They have a district attorney who in his own mind says he is there to make sure that people don't spend time in jail. He will not prosecute crimes. He is judging by how many people get released. And then that same party, the same radical left that elected Larry Krasner, says we should restrict the gun rights of people to defend themselves. It's absolute madness.
George Piquetto.
Yes, when you talk about adding more gun regulation and background checks and banning assault rifles and everything, essentially what you're doing is penalizing law-abiding citizens for the conduct of criminals. Law-abiding citizens, whether they have assault weapons, bazookas, tanks, what have you, obey the law. They are not out to hurt other people. They don't commit crimes with guns. Criminals commit crimes. If they didn't have guns, they'd use baseball bats. If they didn't have baseball bats, they'd use knives. You punish the criminals who misuse guns, not law-abiding citizens. In Philadelphia alone, and it's spreading to the rest of Pennsylvania, violent crime is up 350%. Yet at the same time, the release of criminals who have been arrested using a crime, using a gun in a commission of a crime, releasing them on bail is up 850%. You are putting criminals with guns out on the streets, and that's where your gun problem is, not with background checks.
Sean Guillot, question for you, and the original question was about background checks, too.
So I am a constitutional conservative, and in the Constitution is the Second Amendment, which says the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I can tell you as an attorney, that is one of the clearest cut laws you will ever read. Shall not be infringed, period. The only thing cleaner might be the Pennsylvania Constitution, which says shall not be questioned. So I'm going to uphold the Constitution and uphold your gun rights in this country. But I will say this, there is record high crime in Philadelphia. It is out of control. The murder rates through the roof, carjackings. And what we are seeing is liberal government, radical leftist government, releasing criminals back onto the street. They want to defund the police. So this is not the time to be stripping law-abiding citizens of their right to bear arms, and I'm going to defend that as the senator of Pennsylvania.
Our next question is from Evie DeJesus, and it goes to Kathy Barnett to start.
Mrs. Barnett, what should the U.S. do about the more than 10 million immigrants who are already in the country illegally? What specific changes do you support in immigration policy?
Yes, you know, and I have someone on my team who has spent over 20 years with the USCIS. And let me just say that 10 million, 11 million number that people throw out at us, that is a farce. That is not true. In fact, we have no idea how many people are in our country illegally. What we do know is that last year, 1.7 million people came into our country illegally. They call them unlawfully present people. This year, we're on track for 4 million unlawfully present people coming into our country, and we don't know who they are. We don't know where they're going. We don't know how they're going to take care of themselves. And when we ask a very legitimate question about securing our border, getting back into place, first asylum country, people should not be able to shop, go across 3 different safe countries, get to America, and then ask for asylum. We're called racist. Not me, I'm black. But for the rest of us, we're called racist, right? We're being marginalized and all of that. There's nothing racist about wanting to know who's coming into our country.
Mrs. Barnett, what specific policies would you put in place or vote for to reform the immigration system?
Thank you.
30 seconds.
For that clarification. USCIS, there are 1.5 million people who are trying to get access or trying to get citizenship, and they're on backlog. And it takes about 2 years just to get a green card, 5 years just to get citizenship. One of the things as your senator I will do is provide the oversight and stop abdicating my responsibility as a senator to provide oversight over the USCIS to take away their fee-funded status and to make them become responsible for what it is that they have not done.
Jeff Bardos, question for you, starting with what, as a senator, you would do.
The sons and daughters of Main Street, Pennsylvania are dying by the hundreds every year because we have fentanyl absolutely pouring over our southern border, poisoning Americans all over the United States, including right here in Pennsylvania. 100,000 souls lost last year because of this poison that's coming from China through the southern border. We need to secure the border. We need a secure southern border. We need an immigration policy that makes sense. Sanctuary cities are a huge issue here in Pennsylvania. I've traveled all over the state for 5 years. Now, Mehmet and Dave, they just parachuted in here. They couldn't bother to show up tonight to answer these questions and talk to you about their vision. I've spent 5 years across Pennsylvania, all 67 counties. These issues matter to families. We need safe and secure communities. It starts with a secure border. Pennsylvanians will not stand for sanctuary cities. In the United States Senate, I will vote to defund sanctuary cities, including my beloved Philadelphia, which would break my heart. But we absolutely have to hold our cities accountable to the rule of law. Pennsylvanians deserve safe and secure communities.
George Pichetto?
Yes, the border security issue, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy problem to solve. We have to shore up our borders. We have to start stopping just the outright inflow of whomever wants to come here. But that's not immigration reform. Here's one of the big problems in immigration that we have right now. Right now, our agricultural industry, particularly in Pennsylvania, can only get visas on unskilled and low-skilled workers on a seasonal basis. They need workers on a year-round basis. And therefore, those that cannot get a year-round visa, who are low-skilled or unskilled, come into this country illegally for the work. And they are getting here and they are working. What we need to do for immigration and reform is we need to adapt our immigration policies to the realities of the situation. We need year-round low-skilled visas so that we can keep track of these people. We can register them, they can pay taxes, and we know who they are and where they're coming from. That's the kind of immigration reform we need. It's
Sean
not
Gale,
enough just to say we're going to plug the hole at the border.
You've already gotten your 60 seconds. Sean Gale?
Yeah, so immigration starts at the border. You cannot have a nation without borders. And I see all these Republicans, Washington Republicans down at the border, and they have a big sign. And it says, Biden's border crisis. And they're saying, Kamala Harris, get down here and fix this immediately. But what did they do when they had control? They fought Donald Trump every step of the way. Pat Toomey voted against funding the border wall. So if I was down at the border, I'd have a big sign too. But mine would say Toomey's border crisis, because that's who I hold responsible. Not the Democrats who run on open borders. They don't care about drugs and disease and illegals coming across. That's what they promised us. I blame Republicans who promised us border security, and when we gave them the majorities to do it and a president who was more than willing to do it, they failed to get it done. And as your next U.S. Senator, I'm going to hold those Republicans accountable to do what they promised us, because they blew it when they had the chance. And I'm going to bring a wall down to the southern border.
Carla Sands, same question to you.
Right. Well, someone referenced Mehmet Oz a minute ago. So before I answer the question, I just want to say Oz didn't bother to show up tonight because I think he's a minnow. He's MAGA in name only after that debate last night, a minnow. About the border, we have to secure our border and build the wall. President Trump listened to the Border Patrol, and they said they needed a wall. He worked to complete that wall. We know all the machinations. We have record levels of illegal immigrants flooding over our border. We have record amounts of fentanyl, the #1 killer of our youth. It comes from China into Mexico, constituted there, and then the drug cartels bring it over the border. And this is an unholy alliance between the Chinese Communist Party and the drug cartels. We also know that President Trump had policies like remain in Mexico and that you couldn't come from a third country. We know those policies worked. We need to put them back in place. We cannot have 20% of our population illegal by the end of this administration, and that is what is predicted.
All right. We've gone through first question with all 5 of you now. We're going to do something that we call rapid response or a lightning round, where we ask for quick responses to these questions, 30 seconds, if you will, that you ask your question, and then whoever you're asking or who is responding has 30 seconds. Notice I said you asked the question. Jeff Bartos, we started with you. You have an opportunity to ask one of your opponents tonight a question, and that opponent has 30 seconds to respond.
Can I ask Dave or Mehmet?
I know.
They won't answer, but
someone will tweet it back. Come on, we're living in the modern times. So Dave and Mehmet, I have a bunch of questions, starting with, why did you think you could move here and run for a seat in a state that you haven't lived in, you haven't represented, you don't know us, you didn't care about us until you decided that there was an opportunity? You see an opportunity and you take it. I've been running around this state for 5 years. I've lived here my whole life. I love Pennsylvania with all my heart, with all my fiber of my being. I want to go down to Washington, D.C. and fight for Pennsylvania. Where have you been for the last 10 years?
George Paquetto, you have a question for one of your opponents?
Well, I'll just throw out a question to all of my, and I don't regard them as opponents, by the way. I regard them as candidates for the United States Senate, which I think is a noble calling and something that every one of the people up here deserve respect for. But my question to the entire group is, could you imagine having John Fetterman as our United States Senator?
No.
The avowed socialist, woke, liberal person who is going to continue the nonsense policies that are afflicting our country right now. So let's think about that, and let's think about who's going to address that most effectively.
Sean Gale, a question for our opponent?
You know what? I really don't have a question for any of them. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about something that we need to talk about, and that's the weak Republicans we have, starting with our Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. So I have a question for him. You've been there for 36 years, 79 years old, just got elected 6 more years. If you haven't got it done yet, you're not going to get it done now. And that's what we need to change. We need to change the leadership in Washington. We have the same regurgitated Republicans we see all the time. And you name them, they're there. Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, our U.S. Senator Pat Toomey. That's the problem we have.
Carla Sands, question for anyone on the panel?
I'd like to talk to the voters instead. For those of you watching on television or sitting at your kitchen table, many of you are undecided or you're wavering. I'm asking, who do you trust? Who do you trust to go to Washington to protect our farmers from the Green New Deal overreach by this radical administration? Who do you trust to bring down the price at the pump? I will be your trusted conservative vote. I will not be a squish, and they will not be able to control me.
Is that your closing statement, or is that?
I don't think that's a closing statement.
Oh, okay, all right. Kathy Barnett, question for anyone?
Yes, I would. I'm going to take my cue from you and ask Dave McCormick right now, if you watch his commercials or you hear him talk, he tells us all the time that he's going to be tough on China. Here's my question. How in the world are you going to be tough on China when China is the reason why you're so rich? Are you really going to bite the hand that feeds you? I don't think so. I do not believe that you can be in bed with China financially and not be in bed with China ideologically. You have not spent the past 20 years pushing America first. You were pushing communist ideologies.
All right, I have another rapid response question or lightning round question. And I'd like a yes, no from each of you. We go down the line, then we can follow up and talk about it a little bit more. I'm kind of switching up the order because Sean Gale has kind of changed our strategy here. One of the questions we wanted to ask was whether you would support Mitch McConnell as Senate GOP leader if you were elected to the Senate.
That is a resounding no.
Okay.
The man is a complete failure.
Okay, Mr. Bicchetto, I believe you could answer. He has already answered, but Mr. Bicchetto, yes or no?
I tend not to support Mitch McConnell because I think we need new blood, and I think that Mitch McConnell was very divisive in the way in which he handled the second Senate impeachment trial. But we must make sure that we get a true leader in there, and that's going to be very, very important.
Carla Sands, Mitch McConnell for leader?
Well, I think it's the wrong question. I think the question is, am I going to take out Chuck Schumer as the leader of the Senate? And the answer is yes, because we're going to have a red tsunami this year. We're going to elect America First senators, and we're going to take back the Senate. And as a matter of fact, I want you not to think of this as a throwaway vote. Don't vote with your heart. Vote with your head. Who is going to fight for you? Who understands foreign policy, trade policy, defense policy? Who will never back down for you? Who will bring the price at the pump down? Who will stop the out-of-control inflation?
Time.
Carla Sands.
But I do want to ask the question, a yes or no, whether, okay, you turned it on.
Asked and answered.
No, you didn't.
As a matter of fact, this was discussed in the green room, asked and answered. Thank you very much.
So in other words, you want to answer the question?
I mean, even if you depose Senator Schumer, you have to elect a Republican leader.
We're going to remove Chuck Schumer because we're going to take back the Senate.
Who would replace him?
And that pathway rides right through. Excuse me. And that pathway rides right through Pennsylvania, the Keystone State.
Here's a suggestion. Let's move on to the next question.
How about we ask the question and then you respond?
Well, then do so.
Okay. Kathy Barnett?
Yes, I would be a no on Chuck Schumer. But I do want to say these are extremely dangerous times. These are very serious times that we're living in. The fate of our country is going to come down to this decision. I mean, and I know that in every election we always say this is the most important election. No, this is the most important election. I am traveling over 1,500 miles a week, going all across the Commonwealth, and I am, and people are unnerved. People feel squeezed right now, and we all know something has fundamentally gone wrong with the way our country is being ran.
Yes or no on McConnell?
I said no.
Jeff Bartos?
By the way, I'd like to note one of these young people has already formed the Twitter handle Dave McCormick's Podium, and so somebody who's very enterprising, you go claim that, because I'd like to ask that podium one more question, which is why, when you were the CEO of the world's largest hedge fund, did you impose a vaccine mandate? That's one more question I'd like to ask him. With respect to leader, I get down there. I think we get our orientation sometime in November and maybe in December. I'm going to work really hard to get Tim Scott to run for leader. So the answer to that question is it depends who's running. But I can assure you, with my powers of persuasion, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're less good, I'm going to work really hard to get Tim Scott to run for leader.
I think that question here brings a lot of clarity. Why I'm on this debate stage is I'm the only one that has the guts to actually go after the Republican leadership. Mitch McConnell has been a failure, and he just bounces back from majority leader to minority leader. And on day one, when I get to Washington, I'm going to lead the effort to oust Mitch McConnell as the leader of our party. He has to go.
All right. The next question is for you, Mr. Gale, and this is one more lightning round question now, and then if we have time, we'll get to some others. Yes or no, do you want Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee for president in 2024?
I think Donald Trump still has the best chance of winning in 2024. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the Electoral College, and you have swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those are blue states. And you need somebody who's not a generic Republican to win those states. And that's why Donald Trump was able to change the Electoral College. It's also the reason why I can win this election, because I appeal to independents. And that's what we need. Somebody who's willing to go after both parties, because that's what independents are. They're not moderate. They don't like either party. And guess what? Neither do I.
Carlos Sanz, would you like to see the President Trump run in 2024?
There's no question that Donald J. Trump is the head of the Republican Party. He still carries a lot of weight and power. So, of course, if he's our nominee, I will support him. I just want to also just mention, we had two candidates that are not here tonight. One made his fortune in China. He is China first. He actually couldn't have made that money without bowing to the Chinese Communist Party. The other is a Turkish citizen who served in the Turkish military. He is Turkey first, not America first. He says he's America first, but he is Turkey first, clearly, and every other word is Trump when he speaks.
Kathy Burnett.
Yes, I think we have really good options between DeSantis or Trump, but I would support, I think we're going to have some really good options. 2024 is going to be very interesting. Another question, pivoting off of you to Mehmet Oz as well as McCormick, is their affiliation with the World Economic Forum and the fact that with Dave McCormick, his corporation has been a real huge proponent of ESG, environmental social governance. That is the equivalent of what China uses as social credits. If you're good enough, if you're woke enough, you get to do what they allow you to do. That is a very serious question.
Jeff Bartos, President Trump in 2024.
I've had the distinct privilege over the last 5 years to travel all around this Commonwealth and visit all 67 counties multiple times, main streets across this beautiful, beautiful Commonwealth. Donald Trump won in 2016 because for the first time in generations, millions of Pennsylvanians felt like someone was listening to them and fighting for them after being ignored for generations. I think that the changes that we saw during the Trump administration, peace in the Middle East, a China that understood that it couldn't just keep bullying us, Russia that understood where its place was. We saw the best economy in our lifetimes. If President Trump runs again, I'd be proud to support him.
George Pichetto, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I firmly believe that it's our obligation as candidates to talk about ourselves and to highlight our strengths and what we propose to do and how we propose to help people. And I don't necessarily believe in getting up here and attacking somebody else or pointing out somebody else's imperfections. Donald Trump won in 2016 because he talked about himself. He talked about what he was going to do. He talked about how he was going to implement America First policies. And that's what he did. That's the kind of candidates we need. That's the kind of candidate I am.
All right, we have one more rapid response question, and this comes from a reader of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Jonathan, do you have any left?
I'll get it. Apparently so.
Yeah.
So, this question comes from a reader of the Inquirer's election newsletter, which you can sign up for at inquirer.com/PA2022. The reader asks, negative campaign ads seem to poison voters' attitudes toward all politicians. Since some of those politicians eventually become elected leaders, do you think something needs to be done to temper this negativity? And if so, what? To Carla Sanz to begin with, please.
You know, there has been so much negativity in this race. I've watched it. Most of my opponents have been attacking each other since day one, fighting over and over. I'm fighting for our voters to make their lives better, to increase opportunity for our youth, to bring new energy opportunity, to bring companies here and make opportunity. But we know that Kathy has been fighting and attacking me and others over and over. She lost her last election by 20 points in a red wave year, playing the same cards she's playing now. I will beat John Fetterman in the fall.
Mrs. Barnett, she mentioned you in particular.
So, I would love for you to tell me what card, excuse me guys. I would love for you to tell me what card am I playing? This is your second time saying it. What card am I playing?
We both recently
nobody cares what
did
you
a
have to
seminar
say.
together.
I am not attacking her. She has been attacking me since we've been on this stage. I'm not attacking because
I'd
I'm
like to
very
respond.
focused on what's important. And that is our nation is in trouble. It is now or never. I am your best chance at ever getting anyone in office who will actually listen to you and fight for you. That is what is important.
Carla Sands, since she did, applause, hold applause.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
We recently did a forum in a church. I have a faith coalition of over 50 pastors across our Commonwealth. She claimed that because she's a woman, a minority, and has a great personal story, she will win in November. But guess what? In the last general election that she had, she lost by 20 points in a red wave year. The facts don't line up. And as far as I think she is in that river in Egypt, it's called the denial. So she needs to take a hard look in the mirror and understand she lost fair and square.
Time.
They didn't steal it by 20 points.
Now, we could go back and forth all night, but
I'm happy to answer.
okay.
Question about negativity in political
Right,
campaigns.
Mrs. Barnett.
Negativity in political campaigns. Yes, perfect example. I think it's my turn. I think it's my turn.
It is her turn.
It's my turn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So negative, right. I know. You're helping. Listen, the opponent, start my time back over. Wait, we're just joking. Okay. Seriously now. $40 million have been spent on this campaign in just the first 3 months. You only have to spend that kind of money when you're trying to make poop smell good. So between Mehmet Oz and Dave McCormick, that is what they have spent. And the last poll, I am in a statistical tie for first place. How did that happen? Because of the people. They're spending a tremendous amount of money. I am spending very little. I have spent over 1,500 miles talking to the people of Pennsylvania. So the people of Pennsylvania has made me a statistical tie for first place.
Right,
so thank you.
All right. Jeff Bartos, 30 seconds.
I can't believe I'm going to defend the Philadelphia Inquirer, but Cheryl, this is for you. We get it delivered every day. So we're still proud to subscribe. And she's going to be very happy I said that. Look, $60 million, Kathy, I think is the number now. Ooh, okay. They have been fighting with each other on the airwaves, polluting our airwaves because negative ads work. Now, they're fighting with each other, and I am fighting for you. I'm fighting to save Main Street. My entire campaign from day one has been focused on Main Street issues, economic opportunity, safety and security, parental choice, educational choice, empowering parents and students to make the best choices for themselves. We are the answer to negative campaigning. We have to reject it as a people. Vote for me. That's the first step to stopping negative campaigning.
Thank you. It's interesting, John, that you would raise that reader question about civility in politics after I just raised the subject myself. There's no question but that this kind of bickering and back and forth and personal attacks is counterproductive. It's also beneath the level of the office that we are running for. We are running for the United States Senate to represent this country in the noblest and proudest way we can. And I believe we talk about our strengths and we talk about solutions. We do not attack each other on petty personal basis or who did what or what card was played or not played.
All right.
We need to act like adults.
Sean Gale?
Yeah, so I'm not for a negative campaign, but I'm all for telling the truth. And I think it's very disingenuous for Kathy Barnett to pretend that she's not running a campaign purely based on identity politics. Her whole campaign is she's going to be the first Republican black woman in the Senate. And if you ask her to go beyond that, she shouldn't have to. So that is the truth about what's happening here. And I'm glad that Carla Sands had the backbone to say it, and I'm going to say it as well, because that's exactly what we're seeing. And I'll prove it this way. There's 7 candidates running for this race. There's 9 running for governor. There's only one candidate that has to put her picture on the sign, and that's Kathy Barnett.
Ms. Barnett, since they are addressing you, 30 seconds.
Listen, they're punching up right now. They're losing, and so they want anything. They're looking for a viral moment. I mean, like, what do you say to all that? Except for, I'm spending over 1,500 miles. I'm looking in the faces of people. People feel unnerved. People feel squeezed. People want real answers. People want people who they want a leader who will have a backbone made of something a little sturdier than ear cartilage, who understand what the issues are. That's what people want. No more of the foolishness. No more of the
All right.
bickering.
Want to get back.
Barnett is running in this race to sell a book and to be a Fox News contributor. That's
Yeah.
what's going on
All
right
right,
now.
well, let's go on to our questions next. And we have Jonathan Tamari of the Inquirer has a question for Mr. Bartos.
We're back to our normal response times
Right,
here.
right,
So
60 seconds, right.
obviously, you all hope Republicans will be in charge of the Senate starting next year. Senator Rick Scott, who leads the Republican campaign arm, has released his plans that he believes the GOP should follow if you all do take control of the chamber. One aspect of that would require all Americans to pay some income taxes. That includes millions who currently make too little to pay income taxes, although they do pay payroll taxes, sales taxes, other taxes. Do you agree with requiring all Americans to pay federal income taxes?
Are you asking me, do I agree with Senator Scott? Or you are asking me, do I agree with the proposals or all of his proposals? I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Specifically, the proposal about requiring all Americans to pay some level of federal income taxes.
So, travel around the state, as we all do. Pennsylvania families are suffering. Gas prices are out of control. Inflation is run amok. People are not working. Businesses can't find people to work. Our schools have been shut too long. There's learning gaps. Drug overdoses are running rampant. Pennsylvanians are hurting. The last thing we as a party should be doing is talking about raising taxes on anybody. We are the party of opportunity. I'm running to save Main Street, Pennsylvania, because I know and love Main Street, Pennsylvania. As a United States Senator, I'll be in Washington fighting for Pennsylvania's working families to make Pennsylvania all that she can be. That means absolutely engaging and growing our energy industry, helping our agriculture industry, and helping young people make the decision to stay here. We should not have to take a plane to visit our children and grandchildren. Pennsylvania should be the fastest growing, most dynamic state in the nation.
Mr. Bartos, let me follow up on that, on John's question. So you said we should not be raising taxes on anyone. So specifically, just to be clear, you disagree with what Senator Scott is proposing, that even the highest earners should not face renewed taxes.
We should not be raising taxes on anybody. This is very simple. I know the economists make it very complicated. This is very simple. Tomorrow, we could have a moratorium on all federal spending except defense. No more raises. We could tomorrow put in place a federal rule that no new regulations that impact consumers, impact families are put in place until we're out of this inflationary mess. There are steps the government can take tomorrow, Congress can take tomorrow via legislation to stop this absolute tax on working families that are crushing everyday Pennsylvanians. This is what you send us to Washington to do, and this is why people hate politics, because we don't get this stuff done.
Mr. Pichetto.
I think Senator Scott's got it wrong. We should not seek to impose a tax on everybody, regardless of their situation or their circumstance. What we should be working towards is making everybody a taxpayer. That means training them, giving them educational opportunities, allowing them to lead productive lives. And when they do that, then they can pay their taxes. But until they get there, until we provide the structure and the opportunity and the American dream, we need to extend helping hands to people, and we do not just punish them with a tax, whether they can pay for it or not. That's silly.
But he's not talking about low-income earners.
That's exactly what the question was.
All right, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the high earners. Okay.
And they're already paying that tax. It's called inflation.
Sean Gale?
So I think everybody should have some skin in the game and so should pay some taxes, even if it's a minimal amount. But to really do that, you would have an administrative nightmare on your hands. And the cost of actually implementing that would be through the roof. So to do it, we have to simplify the tax code. It is ridiculous how much time. I dread April 15th. It shouldn't be that way. It should be very simple. It should be able to be done on the back of a postcard.
Carlos Sanz?
Senator Scott is a great conservative. I admire him. However, I signed a pledge that I would never raise taxes, and I will honor that pledge. Also, I want to talk to the moms and grandmas out there. I'm a mom too. I want you to know that I will protect your daughter's sports and make sure that biological males, that males will not compete against your daughters. I'll make sure that there's curriculum transparency at the federal level, and I'll protect your kids so they're not indoctrinated with critical race theory, so that they learn to hate each other and hate their great country. I'll also make sure that the teachers are not able to confuse your children sexually or sexualize your little minor children. I'll make sure at the federal level that I protect your kids, and I'll do everything I can that the money follows the child, and they're not prisoners of their zip code, but every Pennsylvania child gets the opportunity to absolutely perform to their greatest destiny.
Time. Ms. Sands, could we ask to answer the question rather than move on?
I, in fact, did answer your question. You asked me if I supported raising taxes, asked and answered.
Along with a couple other issues.
May I go?
Yeah. Okay.
Listen, I grew up on a pig farm below the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I clawed my way from underneath a rock in order to be able to create a different narrative for myself and for my children along with my husband. And let me tell you, it was not someone writing me a stimulus check or a child credit, none of that. What helped me was the fact that we were living then in a country that created opportunities. And I believe, so a job is what people need. But how do we do that? Jobs follow businesses who are willing to invest, who are willing to locate and produce here in America. So how do we create an economy where businesses are willing to do that? Right now, there's a very hostile environment. So if you want to help someone like me, because I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back and a well on the side. That is PO. How do you do that? You create an economy where you're not giving people tax credits. I mean, not tax credits, but you're not giving them givings, but you're creating an environment that allows them to be able to pull themselves out of that.
Let's move on. Paula Reed Ward, you have the next question for Mr. Bicchetto.
Mr. Bicchetto, all of you have described yourselves as pro-life. At what stage in a pregnancy do you support banning abortion? Would it be at 15 weeks, 6 weeks, or conception?
Conception. Let me at least relate my personal story to you. As I mentioned, I was left on the doorstep of an orphanage. I was an unwanted child. Back in the day when I was born, they didn't have Roe versus Wade, and they had orphanages and institutional systems to take care of unwanted babies. Today, abortions are all too readily available. I am a living personification of why there should not be abortion. If there was abortion, I wouldn't be here. The sanctity of life is absolute. There are no exceptions. I would make one exception where the mother's life is directly and absolutely at risk on a childbirth, and only if the child did not have any kind of other issues. But the sanctity of life is absolutely paramount, and I can't express it more strongly to you than to relate to you my own story.
Mr. Gale?
Life begins at conception without any exceptions, period. And the pro-life issue is the issue that put me in this race. Because in 2015, the Montgomery County Republican Party, the Republicans, endorsed a board member of Planned Parenthood to run for county commissioner in Montgomery County. And along with my brother Joe, we got together and we said, this is unacceptable. So as the campaign manager, I supported Joe as a candidate to run for that seat. And he ran on a pro-life platform, and he won that seat and became the youngest commissioner in history and the first ever elected without the support of either major party. That's the kind of backbone we need. And right now we have a 6-3 conservative majority on the bench on the U.S. Supreme Court. And the issue of Roe v. Wade is going to be coming up. And I pray every day that they overturn that decision and that we have Montgomery County Commissioner Joe Gale as governor so that he can make Pennsylvania a pro-life state and we can end the atrocity of abortion.
I just wanted to find, you said in your answer, no exceptions?
I am pro-life. Life begins at conception, no exceptions.
Okay. All right. Carla Sands?
It's an important question. I am pro-life at the beginning of life and at the end of life. And we can see what today's radical Democrats want to do in the United States. This is not the party of John F. Kennedy. This is the Democrat Party of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and they're attempting to implement federally paid for abortion up to and including birth, in some places after birth. I will vote always to protect life. These radical Democrats are at such war with our values here in Pennsylvania that they're at war with our farmers. They're attempting to implement Green New Deal regulations on our farmers, regulating the methane, the water. They have a tax that they want to implement to take the family farms. All work to protect our farmers. And our energy sector, they're at war with our energy sector. All work to grow our energy sector. And I actually called for Operation Warp Speed to harvest, to put the pipes in, and to build a pipe to Philadelphia so we can sell it to our friends and allies in Europe, and they don't have to buy Russian gas.
Kathy Barnett, abortion.
Yes, thank you so much. You know, I remember when Mehmet Oz, when I saw him talking about equating a beating heart in the womb as an acorn with just electrical currents moving through it. And I was aghast because my life has value. I am the byproduct of a rape. My mother was 11 years old when I was conceived. My father was 21, and I am so grateful to God that there were adults in the room who, I remember my grandmother marking her name with an X, and that was her signature. But my grandmother knew enough to know that what was growing in my mother's womb was a life. And I am so very grateful to God that there were adults in the room who saw value in me. And as a result of me standing here, I have children who are amazing and exactly the kind of people we all want being released into our society one day. George and I, we've talked about it before. I'm just so very grateful to God. I am pro-life.
Can I ask the follow-up by asking any exceptions?
No.
No exceptions.
Except for my own self, no exceptions. For the life of a mother, not the mental acuity of the mother, but for the life, the absolute life of the mother. Right, in danger, then yes. But for myself, no.
Jeff Bartos?
Scripture teaches that we are made in God's image. And as conservatives, we passionately fight for the unborn. We passionately fight for life because this is what it's all about. As a nation, we are where we are today when we step in Philadelphia over people shooting up and passing out on the sidewalk. When we allow veterans to sleep under bridges, over the last 60 years, 50 years, we have gotten so far away from the simple notion of looking out for each other, for protecting life, for caring about each other. The reason we've gotten here is because the government has stepped in each place since the 1960s, and certainly since Roe versus Wade in '73, and put a barrier between fellow citizens. This issue is so divisive because the government is in the way. The most conservative of values is at the grassroots, we look after each other, we take care of each other. We must protect life because that is who we are as a society. I believe life begins at conception. I do have exceptions to protect the life of the mother, and in the rare circumstance where the pregnancy is as the result of the rape or incest.
Okay, thank you. All right, we only have a few minutes. We only have a few minutes left, and we'll get to another rapid response round if we can. Kind of an unusual question, but I want you to think about this. And this one does go to Sean Gale. Name a living Democrat that you admire and why.
Boy, that might be the toughest question you had tonight, because what we've gotten out of the Democrat Party is embarrassing. And frankly, what we've gotten out of the Republican Party is embarrassing, because when we send them to Washington, they vote like Democrats. So if you asked me to name a living Republican, I'd have to scratch my head for a few moments. Maybe the only exception there would be Donald Trump, who actually fought for what we stand for.
So no Democrat that you can think of?
No, they don't impress me very much.
Okay. Carla Sands, 30 seconds. Do you have a living Democrat that you admire?
You know, I actually, as the U.S. ambassador, I used the speeches of John F. Kennedy to inspire me. He's no longer living, but his words still ring true. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. I think he, in retrospect, was a great statesman, And actually, today, he'd be a Republican. So he's my favorite Democrat for this evening's answer.
That's why we put living in there, but Kathy Barnett, living
Yes,
Democrat.
thank you so much. I admire Joe Manchin. And as your senator, I will look for the Joe Manchins in the room, because when you have all of this polarization on these sides, it's the rest of us in the middle where the nation just isn't working for us. As your senator, I won't go there with a bone to pick. I will go there to actually get things done so our lives can be better. That's the point of it all, is to get people in office who will work for you, not go in front of videos, of television stations, beat their chest for a viral video to then fundraise for. I will work for you.
We are running short on time. So, Mr. Bartos, 30 seconds. Living Democrat you admire?
I fought so clever that I got Joe Manchin and then Kathy got it. So I'm going to come up with another one, although I will add Joe Manchin to that. I would also add Senator Joe Lieberman, a deep man of faith, a great advocate for the U.S.-Israel relationship, someone who fought very, very hard over the years to keep a nuclear weapon out of the hands of Iran, to have a robust foreign policy in the Middle East, and a man I know who lives his faith. And so I admire Senator Lieberman, but thank God we have Joe Manchin in the United States Senate, because the Biden administration's disastrous policies would be 10 times worse if Joe Manchin weren't there.
George Pichetto?
Yeah, there's no question Joe Manchin is the one that I would pick. I may not agree with his philosophy or his outlook, but I do believe that the man is principled. He wants to represent his constituents in the best way that he can, and he made some awfully difficult choices at great personal risk, particularly with regard to the crazy $5 trillion spending program. The other Democrat, of course, that I don't know if they can be admired, but we certainly have learned a lot, is Joe Biden. Is there anything that more demonstrates our need for a Republican administration and change of leadership than Joe Biden?
Short on time. All right, we're going to do 30-second closing statements, and we're going to go backwards this time. Carla Sands, let me start with you, 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I'm particularly talking to you at home. I'm Carla Sands, and I'm running for the Senate. And I will never back down on behalf of working for the people of Pennsylvania. There's been a lot of rhetoric, there's been a lot of ugly talk, and even hate talk in this campaign. But I'm a First Amendment, pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, constitutional conservative, businesswoman, Christian, and mom. And I will never be a squish. I will always vote to protect Pennsylvania and put you first. Thank you.
Sean Gale.
I can't tell you I'm going to go down and single-handedly build a border wall myself. I can't make that pledge. And there are other conservatives. Ted Cruz is a constitutional conservative with a pristine voting record on all the issues. I'd probably vote like Ted Cruz. But what Ted Cruz isn't that I am is a disruptor to the system. I'm going there not only to hold the Democrats accountable, but those bad Republicans who let us down time and again. So if you want a conservative with a backbone, there's only one choice in this Senate race, and that's Sean Gale. Thank you very much.
George Pichetto, 30 seconds.
I believe that rather than disrupting things, what we try to do, or should try to do, is find solutions. I've been finding solutions for difficult problems my entire professional career. I've fought the woke mob when they tried to tear down the Columbus statutes. I fought the DAs when they tried to release cop killers from jail. I defended Donald Trump when they tried to impeach him a second time. I fight for what I believe in. I find solutions. So I'm not going to Washington to disrupt. I'm going to Washington to represent you, to advance our common interests, and to make this Commonwealth a better place to live.
Jeff Bartos, 30 seconds.
I'm a kid from Reading, Pennsylvania. I know this Commonwealth and love Pennsylvania with every fiber of my being. I've had the privilege to travel for 5 years, and my campaign is about saving Main Street, Pennsylvania, because I know and love Main Street, Pennsylvania. You can trust me to go to Washington and fight for you and your family. I always have, and I always will. Thank you so much for having us tonight. I'd be honored to have your vote on May 17th. Thank you.
Kathy Barnett.
Yes, you know, when someone mentions a county, I see faces now. I see stories. I'm looking in your eyes. I've been in $1 million homes, and I've been in some very humble homes. I love Pennsylvania. And as I said earlier, I am your best chance at ever getting anyone in office who will actually work for you, fight for you, listen to you. Listen, we have the better values in the Republican Party. We have the best story to tell. We just got to stop picking people who suck at telling it. Thank you so much for your time.
I'd like to thank the candidates for their participation and the organizing sponsor of tonight's event, Spotlight PA. In partnership with sponsors of tonight's debate, Spotlight PA, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Trib Live, Penn Live, WITF, PCN, and of course, Dickinson College. Candidates, thank you very much. Just a reminder that the Pennsylvania primary is on May 17th. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a good night.
You've been watching live coverage of a debate featuring Republican candidates for U.S. Senate. Now that you've heard from the candidates, we'd like to hear what you think. Joining us to discuss tonight's debate are Dom Giordano, host of the Dom Giordano program on WPHT 1210 in Philadelphia, and Sam Chen, assistant professor of political science at Northampton Community College and host of Face the Issues. Gentlemen, thank you both.